Have a listen to these Spanish words and see if you can work out the meaning. Importante, diferente, urgente. Okay, and you'll almost certainly have guessed that it's important, different, and urgent. And of course, our more advanced subscribers will know this kind of thing inside out. But as you'll know, we make these lessons accessible to all learners, including complete beginners. So we're just going to give them a hand onto the bus with these words. So most words that end in ANT or ENT in English are the same or similar. In Spanish, you just add an E on the end. So important, importante, different, diferente, urgent, urgente. Okay, the word for it's is just es. Es is it's. So how would you say it's important? Es importante. Okay, and now on to the main part of this lesson. If you want to say as in Spanish, as, in most cases you can translate it as como. Como. Not all, we'll see how this develops in the lesson, but as, in most cases, you can use como. Como, as. How would you say, as it's important, ... rest of the sentence. So, as it's important, what would that be? Como es importante, how about, as it's urgent, ... what would that be? Como es urgente, you probably know that if you want to make a negative, you just use no. So it's not, no es, no es. How would you say, as it's not important, what would that be? Como no es importante, and then the rest of the sentence. Como no es importante, how about, as it's not very different, and the word for very is muy, M-U-Y, so what would that be? Como no es muy diferente, as it's not very different. The word for you know is sabes. Sabes. S-A-B-E-S. Sabes. How would you say, as you know, it's very important? As you know, it's very important. What would that be? Como sabes, es muy importante. Como sabes, es muy importante. How about, as you know, it's not very urgent. As you know, it's not very urgent. What would that be? Como sabes, no es muy urgente. Como sabes, no es urgente. Or no es muy urgente. It's not very urgent. How about, it's not very different, as you already know. It's not very different, as you already know. And the word for already is ya. Ya. So Y-A, ya, is already. So it's not very different, as already you know. What would that be? No es muy diferente, como ya sabes. No es muy diferente, como ya sabes. Como, as, ya, already, sabes, you know. As already you know. Okay, how about, as you already know, it's very urgent. As you already know, it's very urgent. What would that be? Como ya sabes, es muy urgente. If you want to say for me and for you, for me and for you, it's para mí, para ti. Para mí, para ti. So for me, para mí. For you, para ti. How would you say, as you know, it's important for me? What would that be? As you know, it's important for me. Como sabes, es muy importante para mí. Como sabes, es muy importante para mí. How about, as it's different for you, as it's different for you, ... What would that be? Como es diferente para ti, como es diferente para ti. How about, as you know, it's not for me. As you know, it's not for me. What would that be? Como sabes, no es para mí. Como sabes, no es para mí. Okay, the word for so, as in so big, so small, so fast, so expensive, so is tan, T-A-N, tan, tan. How would you say so different? What would that be? So different. Tan diferente, tan diferente. How about, it's so important, it's so important. What would that be? Es tan importante, es tan importante, ... It's so important that, whatever. How about, it's not so different. It's not so different. What would that be? No es tan diferente. No es tan diferente. How about, it's not so important for me. It's not so important for me. We might also say in English, it's not that important for me. It's not so important for me. What would that be? No es tan importante para mí. No es tan importante para mí. How about, as it's so different, as it's so different, ... What would that be? Como es tan diferente, como es tan diferente, as it's so different. How about, as you know, it's so important. As you know, it's so important. Como sabes, es tan importante. Como sabes, es tan importante, it's so important that, whatever. The word for big is grande. Grande, so big, grande. How would you say, it's so big, it's so big that, etc.? Es tan grande. Es tan grande. It's so big that, whatever it might be. Okay, in English we have a way of comparison, which is it's as something as. So it's as big as an elephant. He's as tall as me. Or as I am. So it's the as ... as. So as big as small as important as. Okay? Now, in Spanish, the phrase goes more along the lines of, it's so big as. It's so important as. So instead of saying as, it's so urgent as it was yesterday. And that's the way of saying it's as urgent as it was yesterday. He's so tall as I am. He's as tall as I am. So in Spanish, they use so in the first part. It's so tall as. It's so fast as. So how would you say as big as? Just 3 words. As big as. And remember, it's going to be as. So it's going to be so big as. What would that be? Tan grande como. So big as. Tan grande como. So let's see, how would we say it's as big as a house? It's as big as a house. And the word for a house is una casa. Una casa. So the phrase is going to go, it's so big as a house. What would that be? Es tan grande como una casa. Es tan grande como una casa. It's as big as a house, or the way it works in Spanish, it's so big as a house. Okay, we're just going to do a little grid here because it's easier to see lots of examples together. So in the first one, we're going to have es, it's, and remember, I'm not going to bother writing in no at the beginning because it could also be no es, it's not. And then we're going to have tan, as in so, it's so big as, or it's as big as. And then we'll have some adjectives, grande, big, rápido, fast or quick, tonto, silly or stupid, depending on the context, and importante, important. And then we'll have como, the as word, and then we'll have things to compare with. So let's have un leopardo, a leopard. They sometimes use that for cheetah as well. Una casa, a house. Yo, you'll probably know it as I, but with como it'll be, in English we would say me, as big as me, as fast as me. Antes, before, and piensas, you think. You think. Piensas, you think. Okay, so we'll start off with a straightforward one. How would we say it's as fast as a leopard or a cheetah? It's as fast as a leopard. What would that be? Es tan rápido como un leopardo. Es tan rápido como un leopardo. Remember, we're saying it's so fast as a leopard. That's how it works in Spanish. What about it's as big as a leopard? It's as big as a leopard, this cat. What would that be? Es tan grande como un leopardo. Es tan grande como un leopardo. We could have a sentence like, mi gato es tan grande como un leopardo. My cat is as big as a leopard, a cheetah. Okay, how about, so es is obviously it's, but it's he, she, it's. So it could be he is, or she is, or it is, as we've been using. So let's try one with he is. He's as big as me. He's as big as me, or he's as big as I. What would that be? Es tan grande como yo. Es tan grande como yo. How about he's not as stupid as me. He's not as stupid as me. what would that be? No es tan tonto como yo. No es tan tonto como yo. He's not as stupid or he's not as silly as me or as I am. How about it's not as important as before? It's not as important as before. What would that be? No es tan importante como antes. No es tan importante como antes. How about it's not as silly as you think? It's not as silly as you think. What would that be? No es tan tonto como piensas. No es tan tonto como piensas. And of course that could also be he's not as silly or stupid as you think. If we wanted to say she is not as silly as you think or as stupid as you think, we would have to say change tonto to tonta. No es tan tonta como piensas. She's not as silly as you think. Okay, let's make a long sentence by adding something before a sentence from the grid. So how would we say, as you know, she's not as silly as me or as I am. As you know, she's not as silly as I am. Como sabes, no es tan tonta como yo. Como sabes, no es tan tonta como yo. As you know, she's not as stupid as me, as I am. She's not as silly as I am. How about, as you already know, it's not as important as before. As you already know, it's not as important as before. What would that be? Como ya sabes, no es tan importante como antes. Como ya sabes, no es tan importante como antes. Okay, so we've seen that como is the most usual, the most common translation of as. So as you know, como sabes, as it's important, como es importante. We learned that when we use the comparison in English, which is as something else, as big as, in Spanish they say so big as, so clever as. So we use tan como. If we want to say as with the same as, they say igual que. So the same as is igual que, basically being equal to, or que is that, so equal that, but we could think of it as equal to. So the same as, igual que. How would you say? It's the same as before. It's the same as before. What would that be? Es igual que antes. Es igual que antes. How about she's not the same as me. She's not the same as me. What would that be? No es igual que yo. No es igual que yo. And obviously that would also be he's not the same as me, because there's nothing there to indicate the igual. It doesn't end in an O, so we can't change it to feminine by adding an A on like we did with tonto or rápido. So, es igual que yo, he or she is the same as me. How about, as you know, it's not the same as before. as you know, it's not the same as before. What would that be? Como sabes, no es igual que antes. Como sabes, no es igual que antes.